Good evening. Continuing with the laws of Sphira, and today we're going to talk about something which is a little different, but it's the last seif in the laws of Sphira. It's Taf Pei Tes Yud. So there's something called Chadash and Yashan. We keep talking about Sfiras HaOmer, Sfiras HaOmer. So we count the Omer, Sfiras HaOmer, from the day that the Omer offering was brought in the temple. That day was the second day of Pesach. Now, what did that Omer offering do? That Omer offering allowed you to eat grain from the previous year. Let's say grain in the field, that it took root in the field, let's say in June. So after you harvest that grain, you're not allowed to eat it. You're not allowed to eat it until after you bring the Omer offering, which is the second day of Pesach. So that's called Chadash. Chadash literally means new, and any new grain you are not allowed to eat. Yashan refers to the grain after the Omer offering was brought. So now we're a few weeks after when the Omer offering would have been brought in the temple. So now any grain pretty much is fine because nothing really took root right after Pesach, and then you harvested it. Grain doesn't grow that fast. So any grain now, any cereals, whatever it is, all of it really was harvested from before Pesach. So everything is fine. Everything is Yashan now. So let's see what the Shulchan Aruch says. Asr la'echel chadash. It is forbidden to eat chadash. Af bizman hazeh, even nowadays. So even though now we don't bring the Omer offering in the temple because we don't have a temple, nowadays we still cannot eat chadash. Ben lechem, ben keli, ben karma, whether it is bread, whether it's parched grain or raw grain, ad chilas lal yud ches b'nisan, until the 18th of Nisan, u'be'eretz Yisrael ad chilas lal yud zayin b'nisan. In Israel until the 17th of Nisan. So the Omer was brought usually the 16th. So since the Omer was brought on the 16th, the whole day is forbidden to eat it. And then outside of Israel, we add an extra day. So let's see some of the Mishnah Berurahs here. Asur la'echel chadash, hainu tevua shenishushu acher tazayim b'Nisan. Chadash is any wheat that took root in the ground after the 16th of Nisan. Shehuzman hakravas ha'omer. That is the time when they brought the Omer. Because if it took root before the Omer, then the Omer permits one to eat this grain. Now, what types of grain or foods is Chadash applicable to? So chitim, so wheat, usarim, barley, kusmin, spelt, shibal, shual, oats, v'shipon, and rye. So the 5 grains. Af mizman hazeh. So he says, even nowadays, medechsiv v'lechem v'kali v'karmel lo soichlu ad etzem hayom hazeh. It says you shouldn't eat bread and the parched grain and the raw grain until that day. B'chol moshvei seichem, in all of your places. So since it says b'chol moshvei seichem, in all your dwelling places, it sounds like even outside of Israel you have to keep it. And even nowadays, mashma mizeh da'af b'chutz la'aretz noig yisra ad etzem hayom. So even outside of Israel. Tahainu yom avas korban shu tazay b'nisan u'mishum svekad yom machmir od al yom echad. And outside of Israel, we add an extra day. So I'm going to skip some Mishnah Berurahs. And, okay, it says, when we call Malcolm Rov HaOlam Ein Yisrael Klal B'Yisrael Chadash. However, he says most of the world, Mishnah Berurah observes, is not careful about the prohibition of Chadash. V'yeshel limdu aleim schus. Now, we can judge them favorably. L'fishu davar kashal yazayir b'zeh, because it's difficult to be careful in this. V'lochein saimchem mipnei adchak al miktzas harishonim shesovim shechadash b'chutz la'aretz ein elam medivrei seifrim. And those, and their lenient, they're relying on the opinions. There's some of the opinions in the Rishonim that Chadash outside of Israel is only rabbinic, and the rabbis only made their enactment in lands that were close to Israel, like Egypt or Mesopotamia. But if you don't live in Egypt or Mesopotamia, these opinions hold that there is no prohibition of Chadash. So those that do not keep Chadash rely on this opinion. And we can also judge them favorably. Shesofim shechadash ein noeg elo b'tvua shel Yisrael avalo b'shel akum. Ulefizet tzarich lahazir leYisraelim sheish lahem tvua zura basadu shelahem sheinogu ba iser chadash. And they hold that only grain that was grown by a Jew has this prohibition. Now, even though we can't protest to those that are lenient. Mikol makom kol bal nefesh yismach al heterim halalo v'yachmer latzma chol ma she'avshel. He says we should. He says we're not going to protest on those that are lenient, but someone, a bal nefesh, someone who wants to be careful, should be careful as much as possible to not eat chadash. Because many rabbis hold, many early commentators hold that it is in fact a Torah prohibition. Okay, so that was just a little introduction to Chadash and Yashan, and if anyone is interested in learning more about Chadash and Yashan and how to avoid this eating Chadash, right? This time of the year it's not so relevant because, like we said, any cereal that you're eating now, the chances are it was not grown and harvested after this Pesach. That would be really fast. So if so this part of the year it's not so relevant, but later in the year it will be. So the Mishnah Berurah says that really we should be keeping Chadash, but he says that he provides some alimut schus, explaining why people aren't so careful with Chadash, and that will conclude our discussion for today. Have a great evening.